It's right about time to bring you up to speed what's happening globally and in Nigeria. We begin with Philippines to shelter Afghans pending U.S. settlement. Highlights from the Democratic National Convention's first night. U.S. says Iran linked to cyber attacks on Harris Trump campaigns. Nicaragua revokes registration of 1,500 non-profit organizations. And reports says North Korean soldier defects to South Korea. On migration, U.S. and Philippine officials have announced that the Philippines has agreed to provisionally host a limited number of Afghans being considered for resettlement in the United States. The U.S. government will fund necessary services for Afghans as they undergo visa processing in the Philippines, including food, housing, security, medical, and transport, the U.S. Department of State said in a statement on Monday. The United States appreciates its long and positive history of bilateral cooperation with the Philippines and thanks the Philippine government for supporting Afghan allies of the United States, the department said. In a statement, the Philippine Department of Foreign Affairs said the agreement was undergoing final domestic procedures needed to ensure its effectiveness. Washington and Manila did not state the number of Afghans that will undergo visa processing in the Philippines. But reports quoting unnamed U.S. officials said around 300 Afghan applicants will be processed in the Southeast Asian country. The deal is the newest sign of strengthening relations between Washington and Manila under Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., whose election in 2022 marked a shift away from the China-friendly stance of his populist predecessor, Rodrigo Duterte. Over 160,000 Afghans have been migrated in the U.S. since 2021, when the Taliban retook control of the country following Washington's withdrawal of its forces. Thousands of others are in third countries awaiting visa processing for possible relocation under an initiative dubbed Operation Allies Welcome. Many of those eligible for resettlement worked for the U.S. government before the collapse of the Western-backed Afghan National Security Forces. The news that the U.S. had requested its ally to consider hosting Afghan applicants triggered opposition from some Filipinos on legal and security grounds when it became public last year. Last June, Marcos Jr. said the proposal raised many security issues, even as he stressed the long tradition of the Philippines accepting refugees. On U.S. 2024 election on Monday, Democrats opened their convention in Chicago by sending off Joe Biden, and then the president closed the night, which ran majorly behind schedule, with a handoff to Vice President Kamala Harris. Biden said choosing Harris as his running mate in 2020 was the best decision I made my whole career. His passing of the torch established the shift for Democrats, the party which was deeply fractured just last month as pressure grew on Biden to exit the race, was united Monday night behind Harris and against her Republican opponent, ex-President Donald Trump. Democrats attacked the GOP nominee over abortion rights, stressing the former president's legal woes and questioned his morality, and they argued that his policy beliefs will benefit the wealthy while Harris's will better serve working people. Georgia Senator Raphael Warnock, who is also a pastor at the Atlanta Church, where Martin Luther King Jr. once preached, said, "A vote is a kind of prayer for the world we desire for ourselves and our children, and our prayers are stronger when we pray together." The party also highlighted in personal and historic terms the potential for Harris to become the first woman to win the presidency. Hillary Clinton said though she'd fallen short 8 years ago, she wanted her grandchildren to know she'd become there for Harris when the glass ceiling finally shatters. A month ago, they were clamoring for him to go, but on Monday night, the Democrats in Chicago were singing and chanting a different tune, one of gratitude for his decades of public service, personal kindness, and less comfortability for passing the baton to Harris. Biden, in his own speech, we only started after a 4-minute ovation, delivered a spirited message of backing for Harris and her running mate, Walz, before dedicating his remarks to familiar yet scathing criticism of Trump and a detailed recollection of his administration's legislative achievements. He started by recalling the angst that gripped the country in 2020 as he campaigned during a universal pandemic and national racial reckoning. He then began a valedictory wave, weaving in jabs at Trump and, in true Biden fashion, an assortment of aphorisms about the value of good government and the scourge of greed, guns, disease, and authoritarianism. And when the president flagged or stumbled over a phrase, the audience wheeled him through. The anxiety and grips of the spring and early summer in the wake of his ultimately campaign-dooming debate with Trump were gone. Democrats once again had a chance to enjoy being Joe. Still on US 2024 election, the United States has accused Iran of unveiling cyber attacks on the presidential campaigns of Kamala Harris and Donald Trump and aiming US voters with influence operations designed to exacerbate political division. The assessment from the FBI and other federal agencies marks the first time the US government has assigned blame amid new fears of threat of foreign election interference in the country's poll. The FBI, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is responsible for the defense of U.S. government computer systems, said in a statement on Monday that we have observed increasingly aggressive Iranian activity during this election cycle, specifically involving influence operations targeting the American public and cyber operations targeting presidential campaigns. This includes the recently reported activities to compromise former President Trump's campaign, which the intelligence community attributes to Iran, they said. Earlier this month, the Trump campaign accused Iran of hacking one of the websites. At the time, Trump said Iran was only able to get publicly available information. The U.S. statement said Iran had also targeted the campaign of Harris, which will formally accept the Democratic Party's presidential nomination at this week's convention. Iran's mission to the United States issued a statement calling the allegation unsubstantiated and devoid of any standing and challenged Washington to release evidence for the claim. As we have previously announced, the Islamic Republic of Iran harbors neither the intention nor the motive to interfere with the U.S. presidential election, the mission said. The U.S. statement said the intelligence community was confident Iranian operatives using social engineering and other means sought access to individuals with direct access to the presidential campaigns of both parties. Those activities included thefts and disclosures intended to influence the U.S. election process, the statement added without elaborating. The United States goes to the polls on November 5, 2024. Google said this month that hackers supported by Iran were aiming the Democratic and Republican presidential campaigns. A hacker group known as APT42, connected to Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, went after high-profile individuals and organizations in Israel and the United States, including government officials and political campaigns, Google said in a threat report. Away from U.S. 2024 elections, now to Nicaragua. Nicaragua has cancelled the registration of 1,500 non-profit organizations, the newest in a years-long crackdown in the small Central American nation. According to a notice published on Monday, the organizations, which include hundreds of religious groups, are accused of failing to report their financial statements for a period of between 1 and 35 years. Some associations officially closed by the announcement were sports-oriented, hosting basketball, tennis and soccer teams. There were groups for health, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, legal associations and veterans clubs. Over 400 of the groups were religiously tied organizations and most of them Christian. Nicaragua earlier this month cancelled the legal status of the Diocese of Matagalpas Caritas for alleged bureaucratic reasons, according to a report. The diocese is headed by Bishop Rolando Alvarez, a vocal critic of the government, who lives in exile after being convicted of charges including conspiracy and treason. Civil liberties in Nicaragua have contracted dramatically under the long-time leadership of authoritarian President Daniel Ortega, who claimed a fifth term in 2021. His government in recent years has arrested numerous opposition presidential candidates, journalists and human rights activists under a vague national security law. CNN en Español was forced off the air in Nicaragua in 2022. In 2018, widespread anti-regime protests were also met with brutal force, with Nicaraguan security forces killing hundreds of people, wounding thousands and arbitrarily detaining many, according to Human Rights Watch. Tens of thousands of Nicaraguans have fled the country. The United Nations expressed grave concern over the human rights situation in Nicaragua in June. At least 35 people have been arrested since March as part of a crackdown on civic space said Nada al-Nashif, the United Nations Deputy High Commissioner for Human Rights. According to reports, a North Korean soldier has defected to South Korea. Early on Tuesday, the soldier was taken into custody in the northeastern county of Goseong after crossing the border, reports said, citing an unnamed military source. It said the defector was thought to be a staff sergeant. He was being interrogated about his motives for defecting. According to reports, citing a South Korean defense official it did not name, the official refused to give more details. The defection came closely 2 weeks after a North Korean resident crossed the border close to the country's west coast. Crossing the heavily fortified border between the two Koreas is extremely risky and relatively rare. There were a handful of defections by North Korean soldiers in 2017. One of them took advantage of thick fog to cross the demilitarized zone DMZ. Most North Korean civilians who leave make the journey to South Korea through China and other third countries. More stories on climate crisis. 6 missing, 1 dead as tornado sinks yacht off Sicily. On Monday, rescuers were searching for 6 people, including British tech tycoon Mike Lynch, who went missing after a luxury yacht was hit by a tornado and sank off the coast of Sicily, killing 1 of the 22 people on board. The vessel, according to a spokesperson for Italy's Coast Guard, was hit by the tornado at around 5:00 a.m. on Monday. The yacht was anchored roughly a half a mile from the port of Porticello on the Mediterranean island. 4 Britons and 2 Americans are among those missing, the spokesperson said. Lynch, the founder of software giant Autonomy, was a passenger on the yacht, according to reports. The source spoke on the condition of anonymity. 15 people were rescued, including Lynch's wife, Angela Baccaris, and 1 child was airlifted to the Children's Hospital in Palermo. 8 people were hospitalized in total, according to the mayor's office. 1 body was found on the hull of the yacht, the Coast Guard said. A small waterspout, one of many types of tornadoes, developed over the area on Monday morning, according to a report from the European Severe Weather Database. Other strong storms across Sicily brought torrential rainfall late on Sunday, dumping over 4 inches 100 millimeters of rain in less than 4 hours in Brolo, east of Palermo. The weather forecast had warned of potential strong winds with storms across the entire southern region of Italy on Sunday, the Coast Guard spokesperson added. The captain is among the survivors, the spokesperson for Italy's Coast Guard said. The 56-meter yacht called the Bayesian, which flies under a British flag, had mostly British passengers and crew, in addition of 2 Anglo-French, 1 Irish and 1 Sri Lankan, the spokesperson said. The New Zealand Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade said 2 of its citizens were involved in the incident, but were not among those still missing. The nationality of the dead person has not been disclosed yet. The Italian fire brigade said its divers had reached the yacht's hull 49 meters, 160 feet below sea level, according to a press statement. The brigade also dispatched helicopters to bolster the search operation. The UK's Marine Accident Investigation Branch, MIPE, is deploying a team of 4 inspectors to Palermo to conduct a preliminary assessment of the yacht. A source familiar with the operation said, according to reports. The source, who spoke on condition of anonymity, did not say when the team is expected to arrive in Sicily. In African scenes, Malawi gets $11.2 million insurance for El Nino drought disaster. The Malawian government has gotten an insurance payout of $11.2 million for a crippling El Nino-connected drought that led the southern African nation to declare a state of disaster earlier this year. The African Development Bank said on Monday the payout was given to Malawi this month. Malawi had a drought insurance policy through the bank and the African Risk Capacity Group, an agency of the African Union. The funds will support food assistance to about 235,000 households in some of Malawi's hardest hit regions, and also assist with direct relief payments to over 100,000 households, the African Development Bank said. Malawian President Lazarus Chakwera said the payout was a lifeline for our vulnerable populations. Malawi, which is already one of the world's poorest countries, has had its food supply ruined by the drought, which has been attributed to the El Nino natural weather phenomenon that lasted a year before ending in June. In March, the country declared a state of emergency and said there was a food crunch in 23 of its 28 districts. Crops have failed across the region after El Nino brought below average rainfall between November and April. Tens of millions of people rely on small-scale agriculture to feed themselves and make a living across Southern Africa. Southern African Bloc's SADC said at heads of state summit in Zimbabwe this weekend that about 17% of the region's population, roughly 68 million people, are in need of assistance because of the drought. The United States Agency for International Development said the first 3 months of this year brought the most severe drought in Southern Africa in over 100 years. Zambia and Zimbabwe also declared states of disaster and have asked for international help, and Mozambique, Zambia and Zimbabwe were expected to receive drought insurance payouts by September, the African Development Bank said. They likely won't be enough though, the bank said. Zimbabwe will receive $31.8 million US. In May, its government asked for $430 million US in humanitarian aid. We take a short break, and when we come back, more stories from Nigeria. Don't go anywhere. You're welcome back. Now, stories from Nigeria, and we begin with Tinubu urges ECOWAS to swiftly adopt anti-corruption protocol. President Bola Tinubu has called on member nations of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, to, as a matter of urgency, approve and fully implement the ECOWAS protocol against corruption. Yesterday, Tinubu urged during the 6th Annual General Assembly of the Network of National Anti-Corruption Institutions in West Africa, NISIWA, held at the ECOWAS Secretariat in Abuja. The appeal was in line with the President's determination to eliminate corruption in his capacity as chairman of the Authority of Heads of State and Government of the Economic Community of West African States. From mere commitments and intention, Tinubu urged ECOWAS member states to take action by implementing the anti-graft protocol. He maintained that the region's future relied on its capacity to build governance structures that were not just transparent, accountable and efficient, but also served the interests of the people. Tinubu also announced Nigeria's donation of an office building for the permanent headquarters of NISIWA in the country. Vice President Kashim Shettima, who represented the president at the event, said, in recognition of NISIWA's pivotal role in our regional anti-corruption efforts, I am proud to announce that the Nigerian government has donated a property to serve as NISIWA's permanent headquarters. These gestures underscores our commitment to strengthening NISIWA's institutional capacity and providing a solid operational foundation. As we deliberate on implementing the ECOWAS protocol against corruption, I urge all member states to renew their commitment to this cause. The ECOWAS chairman urged member countries to move beyond rhetoric and focus on concrete actions targeted at harmonizing their legal frameworks to close loopholes exploited by corrupt individuals. He listed all the tangible actions needed to include increasing cross-border cooperation in inquiries and asset recovery, investing in innovative technologies to detect and stop corrupt practices, promoting transparency in public procurement and resource management, engaging civil society and the media as partners in the region's anti-corruption efforts, and strengthening the independence and capacity of its national anti-corruption institutions. Demanding full implementation of the ECOWAS protocol against corruption, Tinubu stated, and I quote, "The task before us is enormous, but so significant is our collective resolve. By working together, sharing best practices and leveraging our diverse strengths, we can create a formidable bulwark against corruption in West Africa." Highlighting the dangers of corruption, he maintained that it had remained one of the most significant obstacles to the progress and prosperity of our nations. He added that corruption undermines the very fabric of our societies, erodes public trust, and impedes the equitable distribution of resources. As leaders, we are responsible for confronting this challenge head-on with unwavering resolve and concerted action. On fuel shortage and crisis, tankers flood depot amid worsening petrol shortage. Numerous tankers are presently at various depots in Lagos waiting to load premium motor spirit popularly called petrol for onward delivery to states across the country as the scarcity of the PMS exacerbates. On Monday, it was gathered that though some of the trucks had begun loading, the supply of the products by the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited was still not sufficient. Oil marketers confirmed the commencement of loading but expressed fear that the queues may not disappear till Friday. Long fuel queues, which have repeatedly rocked capital city of Abuja, Nasarawa, Niger, and neighboring states in recent times, resurfaced in Lagos on Sunday. According to reports on Monday, NNPCL had promised to end the queues for petrol by Wednesday as the black markets for PMS boomed on Sunday. The Chief Corporate Communications Officer of NNPC, Olufemi Sonoye, had said, according to reports, that the oil firm was working hard to tackle the fuel supply challenges, stressing that the queues should clear by midweek. However, when contacted on Monday for updates on the fuel supply situation, the national president of Independent Petroleum Marketers Association of Nigeria, Abubakar Megandi, said marketers will only supply what they got from NNPCL. On his part, Chief Ugadike Chinedu, the National Publicity Secretary of the Independent Petroleum Marketers Association of Nigeria, said the challenges in the downstream oil sector were compounded by the recent nationwide hunger protest. NNPC is the sole importer of petrol into Nigeria. Other dealers stopped importing the commodity due to their inability to access the United States dollar required for PMS importation. As work resumed on Monday, the queues in filling stations added, giving black marketers more opportunities to make money by selling a litre of petrol at 1,400 naira per litre in some parts of Lagos and the country. An official of a petroleum firm who spoke on condition of anonymity said operations at the depot were still low, adding that it could not solve the current fuels crisis as speculated by the NNPC. And finally, on the news, ASU issues 21-day ultimatum for nationwide strike. According to reports, the Academic Staff Union of Universities has informed the federal government of its plan to go on a nationwide strike by placing the government on a 21-day notice. Sources within the National Executive Council of ASU confirmed the development in Abuja on Monday. The notice was issued at the end of the NEC meeting, which was held at the University of Ibadan, and a copy is anticipated to be transmitted to the Federal Ministries of Labour and Education. Remember that ASU had threatened to embark on strike over the non-implementation of agreements reached with the federal government. The Minister of Education, Professor Tahir Mamman, on June 26th, invited the union to a meeting to deliberate on the lingering issues affecting universities and to avert the planned strike. The national president of ASU, Professor Emmanuel Osedeke, who spoke on the outcome of the meeting, said the agreements reached with the federal government had not been implemented. The ASU president said some of the demands included the non-implementation of the 2009 renegotiated agreements. He said the agreements had lingered for over 6 years and the government had yet to implement them. Osodeke said the academic allowances due to their members had also accumulated for over 6 years and nothing had been done about it. On the issue of the revitalization fund, he said he agreed on the needs assessment report to raise 200 billion naira yearly for 5 years. Osodeke added that the government had yet to stop the proliferation of universities, adding that many new universities were being approved without funds to run them. Another look at the top stories: Philippines to shelter Afghans pending US resettlement. Highlights from the Democratic National Convention's first night. US says Iran linked to cyber attacks on Harris Trump campaigns. Nicaragua revokes registration of 1,500 non-profit organizations, and reports says North Korean soldier defects to South Korea. That's all in the news. Thanks for watching. Have a great day ahead.